Arjun, we've talked about transformers a lot on the channel. We saw in hashtag TCM213002 how they revolutionized language models with attention, and in hashtag TCM00030001, their generalizability for sequence transduction.
Exactly. Today, we're diving deeper into the why of that generalizability. What makes this architecture so fundamentally flexible that it can adapt to so many different types of data? Is it really just attention doing all that heavy lifting?
The original paper, "Attention is all you need," makes a very bold statement right in its abstract. It explicitly proposes a new, simple network architecture, the transformer, based solely on attention mechanisms.
Solely? So no more recurrent or convolutional parts at all?
That's their radical claim. They're removing what were then considered foundational components for sequence tasks.
But RNNs and CNNs were the workhorses. Why would you want to dispense with recurrence and convolutions entirely, especially if they were dominant?
The paper immediately explains their motivation. These models are more parallelizable and requiring significantly less time to train.
So it's about efficiency and speed, not just accuracy.
And the numbers backed it up. Look here, our model achieves 28.4 BLUE on the WMT 2014 English to German translation task, improving over the existing best results.
A 2 BLU point jump is huge in machine translation, especially surpassing ensembles.
It's a clear signal that this new, simpler approach was not just faster, but also better.
Beyond translation, they showed its versatility. We show that the transformer generalizes well to other tasks by applying it successfully to English constituency parsing.
So it's not just a translation trick. It's a general approach to sequence understanding.
Exactly. The core idea is that if you can frame your problem as a sequence, attention can handle it. Think of it like this. Traditional models are specialized tools, like a screwdriver for screws, a hammer for nails. Transformers say, what if we just used one very adaptable, intelligent hand for everything?
So attention is that intelligent hand that can pick up anything?
Precisely. It's learning to dynamically focus on relevant parts of the input, regardless of what the parts actually are.
But is it really all you need? Isn't that an overstatement?
It's a powerful claim, and it's certainly not literally all you need for every ML task, but for complex sequence data, they showed it was sufficient to beat specialized architectures.
So attention is all you need for sequence transduction to achieve state-of-the-art results without recurrent or convolutional units.
Now that we know the transformer's big promise, let's peel back the layers and understand how this attention mechanism actually works at a high level. What does it look like inside?
How does this intelligent hand process information without the traditional tools?
We're looking at the illustrated transformer now, which does a fantastic job of demystifying the architecture. It acknowledges that attention was already around, but the transformer brought it center stage.
So it's not a brand new concept, but its exclusive use was new.
Exactly. The big benefit, as this post highlights, comes from how the transformer lends itself to parallelization.
At a high level, the transformer still follows an encoding component, a decoding component, and connections between them.
That sounds like a standard encoder-decoder model we've seen before.
It is, structurally, but the magic is what's inside those components.
Each encoding component is a stack of encoders. They're identical in structure, but don't share weights, learning different levels of abstraction.
So layers of processing, much like a deep neural network, but each layer is an encoder unit?
Precisely. And each encoder has two key sublayers. The first sublayer is crucial.
The encoder's inputs first flow through a self-attention layer, a layer that helps the encoder look at other words in the input sentence.
Self-attention? Does that mean it's paying attention to itself or other parts of the same input?
The latter. It allows a word to understand its context by weighing the importance of every other word in the same sentence.
This post uses a great example. The animal didn't cross the street because it was too tired. What does it refer to? It's the animal.
A human gets that instantly because of the context.
Self-attention allows the model to make that same connection. When processing it, self-attention allows it to associate it with animal.
If you're familiar with RNNs, think of how maintaining a hidden state allows an RNN to incorporate its representation of previous words.
So, like an RNN, self-attention builds context. But how is it better?
The key difference is that RNNs process sequentially. Self-attention looks at all other words simultaneously, which unlocks parallelization.
After self-attention, the outputs are fed to a feed-forward neural network. Crucially, the exact same feed-forward network is independently applied to each position.
So each word's contextualized representation gets processed independently by the same small network.
This also contributes to parallelization. The dependencies are largely contained within the self-attention layer.
The article says the word in each position flows through its own path. Does that mean they're completely separate?
It means they are processed independently after the self-attention has established relationships. The self-attention layer is where the paths interact and share information.
So interact, then process individually. That's how it balances context and parallelization.
This high-level picture shows what self-attention does, but how does it actually associate words? How does it figure out what's important?
That's the core question. What are the mechanics behind this intelligent hand?
The secret sauce for self-attention starts with three crucial vectors for each input word: query, key, and value. These are created by multiplying the embedding by three matrices that we trained during the training process.
So for every word, we get three different perspectives or roles?
Exactly. The query asks, what am I looking for? The key says, what do I have? And the value is, what information do I carry?
Think of it like a library. The query is what you write on your search slip. The key is the index card for each book describing its contents. The value is the book itself, containing the actual information.
So you match your query to all the keys to find relevant values?
Yes, that's a perfect analogy. The stronger the match between query and key, the more of that book's content you'll pull.
The next step is to calculate a score for each word pair. It's the dot product of the query vector with the key vector of the respective word we're scoring.
Dot product. So how similar are the query and key vectors?
Precisely. A higher dot product means the query is more interested in that key's content. It's a measure of relevance. If we're processing thinking, Q1, we get scores by taking Q1.K1, Q1.K2, and so on for every other word in the sentence.
So every word gets a set of scores, one for its relevance to every other word.
Yes, this matrix of scores captures all the pairwise relevance relationships. These raw scores are then scaled, divide the scores by 8, and pass through a softmax operation.
Softmax normalizes them so they become probabilities summing to 1, right?
Exactly. This softmax score determines how much each word will be expressed at this position. It's the attention weight.
The fifth step is to multiply each value vector by the softmax score. This is where the information from other words gets weighted.
So, if a word is highly relevant, high softmax score, its value vector contributes more to the final output.
Yes, irrelevant words get multiplied by tiny numbers, effectively drowning them out.
Finally, we sum up the weighted value vectors. This produces the output of the self-attention layer for the original query's position.
This resulting vector now contains blended information weighted by relevance from every other word in the sentence.
It's the contextualized representation for that specific input word, ready for the feed-forward network.
This mechanism seems quite intricate, but the query, key, and value matrices are learned, right?
Absolutely. That's the crucial part. The model learns what aspects to query, what to look for, in other words, and what information to extract. It's not hard-coded.
So the intelligence of the attention comes from those learned weights, defining relevance.
We've seen how attention works for text sequences. Now the big question, can this exact mechanism, this query key value blending, work for something as fundamentally different as an image?
How do you even get words or tokens from an image to feed into this?
This paper, An Image is Worth 16 by 16 Words, explores exactly that. It addresses the observation that the transformer architecture has become the de facto standard for natural language processing tasks.
But previously, vision was all about CNNs, right? Convolutions were the gold standard for images.
Indeed, before VIT, attention and vision was usually combined with convolutions, not replacing them entirely.
The Vision Transformer, VIT, makes a very strong claim. A pure transformer applied directly to sequences of image patches can perform very well on image classification tasks.
So they just took the NLP transformer and fed it image data? How do you make an image a sequence of patches?
That's the elegant trick. Instead of words, you chop the image into smaller, non-overlapping squares and treat each square as a token or word.
Imagine taking a photograph and cutting it into a grid of 16 by 16 pixel squares. Each square is like a word in a sentence.
So a 224 by 224 image would become 196 such words, 14 by 14 grid?
Precisely. Each of those squares is flattened into a vector and then fed sequentially into the transformer, just like word embeddings.
If each patch is a word, then self-attention must be finding relationships between different parts of the image.
Exactly. The query key value mechanism now learns how much one patch, say an eye, needs to pay attention to another patch, like an ear, to understand the object it's seeing.
So it's building a global understanding of the image from local relationships.
When pre-trained on large datasets, vision attains excellent results compared to state-of-the-art convolutional networks.
That's remarkable, surpassing CNNs, which were custom designed for images.
And critically, it does so while requiring substantially fewer computational resources to train, making it very efficient.
But it says, when pre-trained on large amounts of data. Is that a catch? Does it always need huge datasets?
That's an honest limitation. CNNs have built-in inductive biases for images. Transformers, being more general, need more data to learn those biases from scratch.
So the generality comes at the cost of needing more data if you don't have specialized convolutions?
This shows the transformer as a universal sequence processor. Whether it's words or image patches, it treats them all as tokens in a sequence.
So the same core architecture can read text and see images just by changing how we tokenize the input.
That's the power of the attention mechanism. It's flexible enough to find relationships in any sequential data.
So when would you reach for a transformer?
Anytime you have data that can be represented as a sequence of discrete elements, and you need to capture long-range dependencies.
From text to genomics to time series data, and now images. If it's a sequence, Transformer is a candidate.
Exactly. It simplifies the architectural choices. You focus on data tokenization and training scale.
This really solidifies the idea that the transformer isn't just an NLP breakthrough, but a fundamental shift in how we think about deep learning architectures for diverse data.
It's a testament to the power of generalized mechanisms. I'm Arjun. Another idea in 3 hours. Take care of your mind.
I'm Maya. Thank you for thinking this through with us.